I guess we'll have some question also after for the debate, but before we have our discussions. Dr. Ronen Mandelkern, who is a faculty member at the School of Political Science, Government and International Affairs at the Tel Aviv University, and a researcher in the State Responsibility and the Limits of Privatization project at the Chazan Center for Social Justice and Democracy. He was a fellow of the Polonsky Academy at the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute, and also a postdoctoral fellow at the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Societies in Cologne. His research deals with the political analysis of economic liberalization processes and the neoliberal economy, and focuses on the influence of economists, economic theories, and state institutions on macroeconomic and privatization policies. Ronen?
Thanks a lot. First, two apologies. First, I gave you a too long bio note. And the second one is that following the discussion that we had in the previous session, I was thinking that, I think that there are many people in this room that, know much better than I do about the topics that Hussein just told us about, and especially Polanyi. So I'm looking forward to learn from you as well in the discussion. I think that firstly, obviously, what Hussein has told us now is like really enlightening and most interesting, and I learned a lot. I think the comparative perspective on the different these huge thinkers, which seem to me normally are opposed, being positioned in a position to each other, is really fascinating for me. For example, the idea of a double movement, or the identification of an idea of a double movement, both in Polanyi's study, of course, but also in Schumpeter's. It's a different double movement, but there is this kind of same dialectic development. It's really fascinating. More generally, I think the most important contribution of this work is really shedding light on the I wrote to myself the continuous interaction, but actually it's the inseparation or impossibility, or the lack of possibility to separate between economy and society, between the social sphere and the economic sphere. And it is important in the context of our discussion because obviously it is being discussed against the liberal tendency to make this separation. Both in the ideological, theoretical, analytical level, and both at the level which is the practical, institutional level. I mean, in a sense, I think that it wouldn't be wrong to say, and again, it relates to some discussion we had in the previous session in our group, which discussed Polanyi and what was his point of view regarding the economics and political economy. So I think one of Polanyi's essential arguments and contributions goes to identifying the causal role of economics, of liberal, what we call nowadays economics, what he called political economy, in enabling, in giving the justification, in also giving what we call the institutional instruction sheet for building a liberal order. The institutions that can allow a liberal order, like, for example, back then, gold standard that allows international, liberal international trade, and nowadays other, policy prescriptions and institutional prescriptions. So and this point about the role of economics brings me to my second point, and again, it's kind of, not again, but this is kind of a reflection of our group here, of what we do here. And I think I came about to this reflection when I saw that Hussein's affiliation is with the Department of Economics at the University of Ankara, right? It's very interesting for me, and I think probably for most of us, given the Israeli context, because the Israeli context reflects quite well the division of labor, which is very common between economics and economists and between social scientists, in the most general sense. So I'm including historians and legal scholars who do this kind of socio-political analysis of the economy and of political economy, of economic and socio-economic relations. And in this division of labor, I need to tell you, the economics, what they do is look at the economic sphere and processes that take place in that sphere as if they are separable from society. If society enters, or politics enters the picture it's only as factors that interfere with the smooth functioning of the economy, as exogenous factors in the economists' language, in the economics language, and by the way, for this reason, they are able to tell us something significant about policy and about institutional structures and so on. So I'm including myself in the social scientists, political scientists, and so on part of the world. What we mainly do is a critical analysis of the economic processes. We undermine, or try to undermine, the economists' distinction or separation between the economy and the social and the political. But normally we are much less able to offer significant advice or insights for the society. And well, we all know that. I mean, everyone who has ever, did an interview or talked with someone from the Ministry of Finance or, from the government and so on, kind of, okay, but what do you suggest? Well, I don't know. He got me there. And I think that, for me, this brings me back to what you told us about. So I'm trying to think, especially in the context of this workshop, in which we have both practitioners and academics, and it's really also about thinking beyond the analytical, theoretical, academic terms. Do you think that we can derive from what you told us, from this analysis, an insight which goes beyond the critical, insightful, comprehensive, complicated, the best analysis that you just gave us, which we can kind of offer to our society? Obviously, it also raises the question of, do we really want to be in that position? Do we really want to adopt this kind of position that the economists are, for them it's much easier to adopt? Yeah, so this is the general question, and I have two more specific issues that I wanted to raise, which pertain especially to your last slides regarding the double movement and the current, political historical situation in which we are located, with the rise of populism and Trumpism and so on. And by the way, I didn't mention earlier, but I think that, back to my beginning of what I just said, I think one of the reasons for which, Trumpism, Brexit, populism, etc., raises so much. Maybe it's an obvious thing, but it raises so much opposition, yeah, exactly, and very deep and perhaps sentimental, emotional opposition, goes back to the fact that it really is about this kind of of undermining the separation that that you talked about between the economy and and society. So in this current context, I think what happened in the last few decades is not just a change in economic policy, but also I mentioned that during lunch, there has been a change also in the structure of economic governance. I think government would be better. What I mean to say is that economic liberalization during the last few decades meant not only privatization and cutting welfare state retrenchment or changing the goals of the welfare state toward more like a human capital accumulation and less redistribution and commodification. And it's not just about opening our borders to more international trade and capital movements and so on. It also has been a change of the structure of government in the most general sense of limiting the political influence, political power of the collective representation of interests. It could be it's mostly political parties and unions and trade unions, and the main forms that I think we can identify are central bank independence, which gave essentially the authority to conduct macroeconomic policy, or to be the pivotal player in macroeconomic policy making is nowadays the central bank. Politicians took upon themselves, this framework of fiscal rules, which limits them. Many decisions with regard to the economic realm were allocated to autonomous regulatory agencies like antitrust agencies and others. Obviously it's a very political process, but we generally also term it as like a depoliticization of economic government. And I'm wondering, where does this development, where do you locate it in your analysis? And more importantly, how does this affect the prospects of change, of the further evolution of our political economy, given the fact that we know that, the welfare state evolved from the market society that preceded it, and neoliberalism is a response and an evolution from the Keynesian welfare state that we have before that. And I think, by the way, that this governmental change has lots to do with can be interpreted as a response to the power of unions and political parties, of representatives of collective interests during the golden age of the Keynesian welfare state. And my other questions concerns the international context. what kinds of limitations, again, on the further evolution of our political economic system, the international context puts? Because, well, you just, skipped quite briefly the tables in which, like, summarize the Polanyian analysis in your analysis of the role played or the interaction between international and national institutions. And the years between the 50s, 60s, early 70s were characterized by an international context that allowed for a certain kind of national intervention, of a certain kind of welfare state to develop, or developmentalist policies in certain, in other areas of the world. So I'm wondering, which kind of limitations the current international context puts on us, and what does it mean for future possible, paths of political economic evolution? That's it. Thanks.